We will begin our Remembrance Day service with the entrance of the flags, the land acknowledgement, and the singing of O Canada. Please remain seated for the entrance of the flags.
Please rise. In the spirit of reconciliation, we acknowledge that we are situated on the traditional lands referred to as Treaty 4 territory. These are the territories of the Cree, Ojibwe, Saulteaux, Dakota, Nakota, Lakota, and on the homeland of the Métis Nation. We respect and honor the treaties that were made on all territories. We dedicate our efforts to working together in a spirit of collaboration and reconciliation. We acknowledge all nations, Indigenous and non-Indigenous, who live, work, and play on this land.
Oh, Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love, in all of us command. Quand on voit c'est porter le pays, il sait porter la croix. Son histoire est une épopée des plus brillants exploits. God keep our land glorious and free. Oh, Canada, we stand on guard for thee. Oh, Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
Please be seated. This year, Remembrance Day is on a Saturday. Those of us still on campus will participate with the Village of Wilcox's service Saturday morning. Today, we are recognizing Remembrance Day early, which allows us to unite with Aboriginal Veterans Day. Aboriginal Veterans Day is on November 8th each year. Sophia Banda and Cameron Halkett will read a summary of today's significance, written November 7th, 2011 by Jan Bryant and Dennis Shaw.
Canada might not exist without the First Nations warriors who fought with the British in the War of 1812. The tribes of the Iroquois League, the Caughnawagas from near Montreal, and the Western tribes led by Shawnee Chief Tecumseh played a pivotal role in many battles. With superior reconnaissance skills, accuracy, and fearlessness in combat. They also gave the British a decided psychological advantage. In the two world wars, First Nations people were exempt from conscription. They were not considered citizens of Canada and did not have the right to vote. Despite this, 4,000 First Nations men volunteered for service in World War I and over 300 died. 20,000 First Nations men volunteered for service in World War II and over 200 died. These numbers represent about 30% of First Nations men eligible to serve. To serve in the Canadian Air Force or Canadian Navy, you had to be of pure European descent, although this was rescinded in 1940 for the Air Force and 1943 for the Navy. Corporal Francis Pegamagabo, an Ojibwa man from Perry Island, Ontario, was the most decorated First Peoples soldier in World War I. He was a skilled sniper and trench raider and received the Military Medal 3 times. He returned to become chief of the Perry Island Band. Thomas George Prince, an Ojibwa man from Manitoba, is Canada's most decorated Indigenous war veteran. After spectacular acts of bravery and cleverness in full view of German soldiers and critical reconnaissance missions, he received the American Silver Star and 6 service medals. He was awarded the Military Medal for Gallantry by King George VI in 1945. When he came back to Canada, he was refused the same rights as other returning veterans and couldn't find work, so he re-enlisted and served in the Korean War.
There has been a concerted effort by First Nations and Métis groups to gain compensation for all the returned Aboriginal veterans who were denied veterans' rights and pensions after their years of service. So far, success has been limited. During World War I, women were permitted to vote as a proxy for their father, husband, brother, or son, who was serving in the Canadian forces, although they had no right to vote for themselves. Women were given the right to vote in federal elections in 1919. Although this right was not ratified in Quebec until 1940. Women were granted status as persons in 1929, which meant they could run for elected office. First Nations people were not given the right to vote and run in federal elections until 1960. Aboriginal Veterans Day began in 1994 in Manitoba to honor the contributions of First Nations and Métis people who served in the Canadian military. In 2001, the National Aboriginal Veterans War Memorial was unveiled and dedicated in Ottawa, and commemorative ceremonies are now held in many communities in Canada on November 8th. We remember and honor the sacrifices of all warriors who fought for our rights as Canadians to freedom and equality, and trust that we can work towards a day where all men, women, and children in Canada do have equal rights, respect, and opportunities. We conclude with a quote: "A warrior is challenged to assume responsibility, practice humility, and to center his or her life around a core of spirituality. I challenge today's youth to live like a warrior." Billy Mills, second Native American to win an Olympic gold medal in the 10,000 meter Nagano in 1964.
We lived in a world of heightened armed conflict. Remembrance Day services honor the sacrifices made by Canadian soldiers as well as soldiers of other nations. Today's service will include the elements common to most Remembrance Day ceremonies in Canada: the act of remembrance, the playing of the last post, followed by 2 minutes of silence, and the reveille. Reading of Lieutenant Colonel John McCrae's In Flanders Fields. At Notre Dame, we remember the 68 Hounds who gave their lives for our freedom. We remember all 68 with each little cross attached to a large cross that permanently hangs at the back of the church. This cross was created by former teacher Julie Rudrick and Ken Gowdy of CSO. Following the tradition in Ottawa, where people will return to the National War Memorial during the day to lay their poppies, you will be asked to place your poppy at the wreath at the front of the church at the end of our ceremony, as an act of gratitude and reverence towards our fallen soldiers.
We will now read the Act of Remembrance. The words of the Act of Remembrance come from Lawrence Binion's Ode of Remembrance. It was written in 1914 in England, shortly after the outbreak of World War I, but already long lists of casualties began to appear in British newspapers. Binion originally called his poem For the Fallen. It was later praised by Rudyard Kipling as the most beautiful expression of sorrow in the English language. The Act of Remembrance is from the 4th stanza of that poem. The words of the Act of Remembrance will be posted on the screen. Please join in at the end.
Please rise. They shall not grow old, as we who are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them.
Please remain standing. We now remember with the playing of the last post and the lowering of the flags, followed by 2 minutes of silence. During the 2 minutes of silence, we will display the 27 names that have been recorded of the 68 hounds who gave their lives for Canada.
Please be seated. On May 3rd, 1915, Lieutenant Colonel John McCrae, a Canadian military surgeon from Guelph, Ontario, sat looking at the damages of war on the French countryside near Ypres. As he listened to the larks sing, only to be interrupted by the crash of the big guns in the distance. From his vantage, he could see a nearby cemetery with rows of crosses, the fields covered with poppies. Dormant seeds have been churned up by the guns and vehicles of the battlefield. This provided the inspiration for McCrae to compose his famous poem, In Flanders Fields. Caleb Cornelson, Ivan Clark, Caden McLean, Bree Rutz, and Reed Parrott will now read In Flanders Fields.
In Flanders fields, where poppies blow, between the crosses, row on row, that mark our place.
And in the sky, the larks still bravely singing fly, scarce heard amid the guns below.
We are the dead. Short days ago, we lived. Felt dawn, saw sunset glow. Loved, and were loved. And now we lie in Flanders fields.
Take up our quarrel with the foe. To you, from failing hands, we throw the torch. Be yours to hold it high.
If ye break faith with us who die, we shall not sleep, though poppies grow in Flanders fields.
We will now close our ceremony with the song, Field of Poppies. After the song, we will have the ceremonial laying of the wreath. After the laying of the wreath, you are all asked to approach the front of the church to lay your poppy on one of the wooden boxes, as a display of reverence for all of the fallen soldiers. After this act of reverence, the poppies will be brought to varsity over the noon hour. Everyone will be able to retrieve one to wear for the next few days. Ushers will guide the exit row by row, starting at the front. We ask that you remain silent as you walk to the front of the church and as you exit the church down the side aisles. This will mark the end of our Remembrance Day service.
As the whistle